Hello and welcome to Connecting Jewish Grandparents, the Grand Plan Podcast. I am thrilled that you're with me today. I don't know if it is still Pesach for you or if you're finished with the festival of Passover. It's a funny place to be in the is it yet? Is it not yet? The whole transition from the highs, and I hope that your seder or sidarim were so high and fulfilling and meaningful, and then the coming down from that. But the so much holiday family to time, food time, holiness time, and then coming out of it, and how you move through that transition. So I hope you're doing well wherever you are within that spectrum and process. And noting where you are in that spectrum and process is, I think, why this week's Torah portion is this week's Torah portion. We are in Shemini, which is always just after Pesach, and it's an interesting, maybe surprising portion. It also has the height of spiritual celebration. The Mishkan is becoming active. Shemini, it's on the eighth day, the consecration process. So it's like those great spiritual highs. And then tragedy. Nadav and Avihu, the two of the sons of Aharon, Aaron, the high priest, are killed tragically and intentionally, I guess. I mean, that's God ends their lives and that pain and everything that comes with it. And it's during the process of this great spiritual moment. Okay, so that was one, Mishkan. Two, death. Three, the practical laws of kashrut, of what animals are kosher, what do they have to be kosher, what do they not have to have. And then laws of ritual impurity, laws that we don't observe today. And it all feels a bit disconnected and too much and many valuable parts, but how do you juggle them and how do they come together because they feel a bit dissimilar? And it's also, according to some opinions, the midpoint of the Torah. There's a vav that's bigger than he's meant to be, quote unquote, like bigger than a regular vav. And the commentators say that's because that vav is the midpoint, the very middle letter of the Torah. Now, if you actually count, it's not true, but it's still what the commentators say. So we're going to go with that is the middle letter of the Torah. We are at the midpoint in Shemini. So if we're in the middle, what is the Torah trying to teach us right now with these very different parts? Right? Like if you think of how a story goes, there is like the arc, like what is meant to happen in the middle of a novel that you're reading and a short story, what is meant to happen at that middle point? It's something valuable. So what is the Torah, the greatest piece of writing ever, wanting to teach us right here? It's got to be big, it's got to be powerful, it's got to be important. It's words of Torah and it's the very middle, the filling, I guess. But as I explained, it's not what I necessarily would have assumed was the very middle. Some parts feel distant, right? The Mishkan service, I don't really understand with what's happening with the sacrifices and the different parts. And I'm very disconnected from those rituals today. And some parts feel painfully relevant. The death, loss, grief. What do we do with that when young men die in while they're doing their duty? It's the most painful thing here. Living in Israel, the country weeps together for any of our soldiers that are lost. I suppose the whole world weeps together for them. Then we have the laws of kosher animals, and that is completely relevant, as it describes chewing its cuds, split hooves, fins and scales, these details that we do know when, if you're following the laws of kosher, that's just how you absolutely live your life without giving it a second thought. It's so interwoven in our day-to-day lives, in contrast to the sacrifices that don't relate today and the ritual impurity of insects that we don't observe or relate to today. So it feels confusing and layered, but it's not as random as you might think. This, very simply, is life. At any given moment in life, we are holding what was, what is, what we do, and what we do not fully understand. Let me say those four pieces again. Okay. At any given moment in life, we are holding number one, what was. Number two, what is. Three, what we do. And four, what we do not fully understand. Now, I said that this Torah portion is the very middle, but as we approach the end, I think the third to the last pasuk has words that are beautiful, in some ways mind-blowing to me, and not as relevant to the four big topics I was talking about. The Torah says, "For I, the Almighty, am the one who brought you from Mitzrayim, from Egypt," which we would, as I said, this is right after Pesach, always. "You shall be Kadosh, for I am Kadosh." Right? The Almighty is telling us that we, the people that are made, B'Tselem Elokim, in His image, He is saying, you are Kadosh because I am Kadosh. I intentionally keep using the word Kadosh and not the English translation because the generally used translation is holy. But that's not all that it means, because if you were to try to define the word holy in English, you might get a little bit stuck. You might say like sanctified or elevated, maybe. But what kadosh really means is separate, distinct, set apart. And those are not just spiritual ideas of holiness. They're very practical, reasonable ideas. The Almighty is all spiritual, but He is also reasonable and practical. And in that same way, we are, in His image, acting in a way that is separate and distinct and set apart, a way that is kadosh. But the term that I might use, other than what I've just said, is intentional and differentiation. So what does it mean to be kadosh today? We're not in the Mishkan, we're not in the tabernacle, we're not in the Beit HaMikdash, in the temple. We're wherever we are in the world without those buildings. But through, so we can't use those methods to be kadosh. We have to be kadosh in wherever we live, in how we live, and how we choose. Right? The pasuk says to distinguish between the impure and the pure. This is the work. It's not perfection, it's discernment. I think that distinction and that discernment is getting harder and harder for our offspring and our great offspring. The current generations, the idea of making a distinction between something, this is this or this, has been diffused. At some point, I suspect that there will be a cultural backswing to that. But the idea of nothing being binary, it's not this or this, that everything is a shade of gray in the middle, reduces Kiddusha. When you can't say something specific that it is this and you can't discern this, you're lost somewhere in the middle. And so that bringing Kiddusha to the world is something that you, the grandparents, are specially equipped to do. This is really your calling, and I'm so grateful that you're listening and contemplating what this means for you. So I said, grandparents, I think, and that generation understands distinction and discernment and identity. And that means that a grandparent today is also not about doing everything. The grandparent is the grandparent. They are not the parent and they are not the best friend. That means it's about knowing when you step in and when you step back, when you speak up and when you hold your tongue, what matters and what we can let slide. This is Kedusha. It's not about being perfect. It's about intention and discernment. And it's helping your grandchildren recognize that in you and in themselves. Intention and discernment. I spoke about how this Torah portion has the death of two of Aaron's sons, Nadab and Abihu. He loses his sons. And he continues on. Because life holds joy and devastation, celebration and grief. So having that Kiddusha, being Kadosh, being able to discern, does not mean being untouched by pain. It means continuing to live with clarity and purpose within it. I'm mentioning it here. It's a whole week of my program of Becoming the Grandparent You Want to Be workshop series that I'm doing of in spite of the pain or working through pain in difficult situations. So if this is particularly resonant to you, I want you to know we're going to unpack and explore that together in the Becoming the Grandparent You Want to Be workshop. All right, we are Kadosh. We carry that Kedusha with clarity and discernment and purpose. I said, this is the midway point. So what is Hashem wanting to teach us? How do we put this maybe into a sound bite? Right? What's the main idea right now? Life is complex. Not everything is relevant in the same way. And not everything is something that we can understand, that we'll have clarity on. But it is not our role to have clarity on everything. Talk about Aaron moving on when he doesn't have clarity on his pain. We can talk about doing things when we don't have clarity on the why or the details. But it is not your role to understand everything. It is your role to distinguish, to choose, and to live with intention. So that's the midway of the Torah, the midpoint. But what does it mean for us coming out of Pesach? Where do we take the high of the Seder and let it move us into the year, into the time beyond? what should you carry with you from Pesach into the year? And what are you going to let go of? Where are you going to step in? And where are you going to step back? What are you going to do differently next year for Pesach, but differently next week as we move through the Omer? This is looking for where you want to be clear, discerned, and intentional, and most of all, Kadosh. Now, if you're still leaving with more questions than answers, don't worry. I really hope that you will join me in the Becoming the Grandparent You Want to Be workshop. In that, we will go through 6 weeks of really digging into you personally and the Torah personalities, our Avot and Imaot, Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah, and who they are to us as role models, and who you are and will be as a role model, a matriarch or a patriarch within your family unit, and living and leaving joyous Jewish legacy. So I hope that you will join me in that program as we move through the Omer to the counting from the midway point in the Torah to counting into the year. I hope that you feel elevation, joy, and meaning every step of the way. If I can help you in this process, please reach out. All the best.